Every perfect marriage has its cracks. Mine just happened to shatter in front of an audience. My name is Jacob Mitchell. For 15 years, I've been married to Catherine, brilliant, ambitious Catherine, who built her marketing firm from nothing into one of Boston's premier agencies. From the outside, we were that couple everyone envies. Successful careers, beautiful colonial in Brookline, vacation photos from exotic locations that made our friends seethe with jealousy. We had it all figured out, or so I thought. I sell luxury real estate. I'm good at reading people, at sensing when something's off. It's how I know when a client is serious about buying or just wasting my time. But somehow I missed the signs in my own home. The distance grew so gradually that I barely noticed it happening. Catherine started working later, traveling more frequently, missing dinners and events. Her kisses became perfunctory, conversations reduced to logistics. When I'd ask about her day, she'd give me the highlights reel, the sanitized version she probably shared with her assistant. Nothing real, nothing vulnerable. It's just work stress, she'd say. This new client is demanding. I believed her because I wanted to believe her, because the alternative was unthinkable. Until one night in March, when I couldn't sleep and found her phone glowing on the bathroom counter. She'd left it unlocked, something she never did. I stood there debating with myself about respecting her privacy. Then I thought about how she'd changed the passcode last month without telling me, how she always kept the phone face down, how she stepped out of rooms to take calls, one text preview on the screen. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about. The sender was Peter Whitaker, client. My stomach dropped as I opened the message thread. What I found wasn't business correspondence. It was an intimate conversation spanning months. Plans for meetups in hotel bars, inside jokes, complaints about me, about us, about our stagnant relationship. Jacob's a good man, she'd written, but we're just going through the motions now. With you, I feel alive again. I scrolled back to December, finding the first flirtatious exchanges. 4 months. This had been happening for 4 months while I was wondering why my wife seemed distracted. I didn't confront her that night. Something cold and calculating took over, a part of myself I didn't recognize. I put the phone back exactly as I'd found it and returned to our bed, lying beside her for hours, studying the ceiling, planning my next move. Because this wasn't just about an affair. This was about my life being a carefully constructed lie. And I wanted everyone to see the truth. The next morning, Catherine kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong. Board meeting tonight, and she said, "Don't wait up." I nodded, smiling. No problem. Good luck with the presentation. After she left, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Then I opened my laptop and began my investigation. Peter Whitaker wasn't just any client. He was the VP of marketing at Nexus Technologies, Catherine's biggest account, worth millions in annual billings. I found him on LinkedIn, Harvard MBA, divorced 2 years ago, recently relocated to Boston from Chicago. His profile picture showed a man with salt and pepper hair and the kind of confidence that comes from old money. I dove deeper. Social media accounts, corporate press releases, charity event photos where sure enough he and Catherine appeared together, standing a little too close. In one image from a gala last month, his hand rested on the small of her back. I remembered that night. She'd come home after midnight, claimed the event ran long, and slept in the guest room because she didn't want to wake me. By afternoon, I had mapped out their relationship timeline, the business meetings that ran late, the weekend emergency client situations, the conference in New York that coincided with his business trip there. I even found the hotel where they met most frequently, the Liberty, downtown. Catherine's company had an ongoing corporate rate there for visiting clients. How convenient. At 6:30 p.m., I drove downtown and parked across from the Liberty. Sure enough, Catherine's silver Audi pulled into the valet area at 7:15. Peter arrived separately 10 minutes later. They didn't even look around to see if anyone was watching as they walked in together, laughing about something. I sat in my car for almost an hour, the anger building into something dangerous. Then I called my friend Marcus, who worked as head chef at Sorolina, one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants. "Hey, Mark, I need a table for 2 next Friday. And I need something else, a favor you're going to think is crazy." After explaining my situation and my plan, there was a long pause before Marcus sighed. "You sure about this, Jake?" There's no coming back from something like this. I'm sure, I said, watching the hotel entrance. She didn't worry about coming back from what she did. For the next week, I played the role of oblivious husband perfectly. I didn't ask questions when Catherine came home late. I didn't comment when she took calls in another room. I was the picture of the distracted, comfortable spouse who had stopped paying attention. Meanwhile, I was setting everything in motion. First, I called Catherine's assistant, Linda, under the pretense of planning a surprise for Catherine's upcoming birthday. Linda had always liked me, and after some gentle prodding, confirmed what I suspected. There was no board meeting that night, and Catherine had blocked off her calendar with vague client meetings 3 afternoons a week for the past several months. Next, I contacted several of the partners at Catherine's firm, inviting them to join us for a celebratory dinner at Sorolina. I told them Catherine had landed a major new account, but wanted to keep it quiet until we could announce it properly. They were thrilled, especially since business had been slower than usual lately. Then I reached out to Peter's assistant, posing as someone from Catherine's office, saying Mr. Whitaker was invited to join Catherine and the agency partners for dinner on Friday to discuss expanding their working relationship. The assistant confirmed his attendance. Finally, I arranged for a private investigator to document Catherine and Peter's meetings throughout the week, gathering photos, videos, and timestamps of their rendezvous. It cost me $5,000, but it would be worth every penny. By Friday morning, I had a complete dossier of their affair, neatly organized in a folder. I also had a second folder containing financial records showing that Catherine had been siphoning company resources to support her trysts, charging hotel rooms as client accommodations, billing romantic dinners as business meetings, even using the company car service to transport them both to a weekend getaway in Vermont. As I knotted my tie that evening, Catherine emerged from her closet in a black dress I'd never seen before. "You look beautiful," I said and meant it. She was stunning, the kind of woman other men envied me for. At least they used to. "Thanks," she said, barely glancing at me as she fastened diamond earrings I'd given her for our 10th anniversary. "Are you sure you need to come tonight?" "It's just a boring business dinner," I smiled. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. Besides, you've been working so hard lately. I want to support you." She looked momentarily uncomfortable but nodded. "That's thoughtful. We should take separate cars, though. I might need to stay late with the team after." "Of course," I said. "Whatever works best." Sorolina was buzzing when we arrived. Marcus had arranged everything perfectly. A large private dining room with a central table set for 8. Catherine froze when we entered and she saw her business partners already seated, champagne flowing. "Jacob, what is this?" she whispered, her smile strained. "Surprise," I said. "I thought you deserved to celebrate your success with the people who appreciate you most." Before she could respond, her partners stood to greet us, congratulating her on the new account I'd mentioned. Catherine played along brilliantly, though confusion flickered behind her eyes. "We're just waiting for one more guest," I announced as we took our seats. Catherine gave me a sharp look. "Who else is coming?" she asked quietly. I just smiled and poured her a glass of champagne. "Drink up, darling. Tonight is special." 10 minutes later, Peter Whitaker walked in, stopping short when he saw the assembled group. His eyes darted to Catherine, whose face had gone pale. "Mr. Whitaker!" I stood, extending my hand. "Thank you for joining us. Please have a seat right here." I indicated the chair directly across from Catherine. The tension was exquisite. Neither of them knew exactly what was happening, but both sensed something was very wrong. Catherine's partners looked confused. They knew Peter as an existing client, not a new account. Once everyone was seated, I stood and raised my glass. "I'd like to make a toast," I announced, "to partnerships of all kinds." Catherine was staring at me now, her eyes pleading. I ignored her. "Some of you might be wondering why I've gathered you all here tonight," I continued. "Catherine told me she had a business dinner, and I thought, what better way to support my wife than to invite her closest colleagues to celebrate with us?" I pulled out the first folder and placed it on the table. "I prepared some materials I think you'll find interesting." I began distributing copies of hotel receipts, timestamp photos, and text message screenshots to everyone at the table except Catherine and Peter. The room grew deathly quiet as understanding dawned. "For the past 4 months," I said calmly, "my wife has been having an affair with Mr. Whitaker. That alone would be a personal matter between us. But when company resources are being misappropriated to fund these rendezvous, I believe it becomes a matter of professional concern as well. I opened the second folder. Here you'll find evidence that Catherine has been charging personal expenses related to this affair to the company accounts. Hotel rooms, dinners, weekend trips, all billed to Nexus Technologies retainer or to the agency's expense accounts. One of the partners, David, looked up from the documents, his face ashen. Catherine, is this true? Catherine had gone completely still, her knuckles white around her champagne glass. Peter was staring at the table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Jacob, Catherine finally said, her voice barely audible. We should discuss this privately. Why, I asked. You didn't feel the need for privacy when discussing our marriage with Peter. Let me read you a few highlights. I pulled out my phone and began reciting her text messages. Jacob has no idea how dead I feel inside when I'm with him. Or this one. Sometimes I look at the life we've built and wonder if any of it was worth it. The room was so silent you could hear the ice melting in the water glasses. Stop, Peter finally said. This isn't appropriate. I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. Not appropriate? You've been sleeping with my wife for 4 months. You've been letting her company foot the bill for your affair. And you want to lecture me about what's appropriate? I turned to Catherine's partners. I'm sorry to involve you all in this mess, but Catherine has betrayed more than just me. She's betrayed your trust as well. She's been stealing from the company to finance her affair. David cleared his throat. I think we should continue this discussion another time. Catherine will need to meet first thing Monday morning. Catherine didn't respond. She was staring at me with a mixture of fury and disbelief. I stood up. Enjoy your dinner. It's already been paid for, not by the company this time, but by me. Consider it my parting gift. I tossed my napkin on the table. Catherine, I've moved your things to the guest room. My lawyer will contact you on Monday. As I walked out, I heard Catherine call my name, but I didn't turn back. In the restaurant's main dining room, heads turned as I passed, drawn by the commotion from our private area. I nodded politely to Marcus as I left, feeling strangely calm. In the cool evening air outside, I finally took a deep breath. It was done. The truth was out. I had no idea what would happen next, but for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. I didn't go straight home that night. I couldn't face the empty house knowing Catherine might return there. Instead, I drove to our beach house in Cape Cod, a place I hadn't visited in months because Catherine had claimed she needed it as a creative retreat for work. Now I wondered if she'd brought Peter there too. The drive gave me time to process what I'd just done. Had I gone too far? Maybe. But as the adrenaline faded, I didn't feel regret, only a strange, hollow relief, like lancing a boil that had been festering for months. When I arrived at the beach house after midnight, I was surprised to find it immaculate. No sign of romantic trysts. Perhaps this was the one thing she hadn't tainted. I poured myself a whiskey and sat on the deck, listening to the waves crash against the shore. My phone buzzed constantly. Messages from Catherine, from her partners, even one from Peter. I ignored them all. Instead, I called my older brother James, who lived in Seattle. Despite the time difference, he answered immediately. Jake, everything okay? Not really, I said and told him everything. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Damn, little brother, you don't do anything halfway, do you? You think I went too far? I think Catherine deserved what she got, he said firmly. She wasn't just cheating, she was stealing and lying to everyone. What were you supposed to do? Have a quiet little chat with her and let her spin the story her way? His words reassured me. James had always been my moral compass. If he thought I'd done the right thing, maybe I had. What happens now, he asked. Divorce. Starting over. I don't know. Come to Seattle for a while, he suggested. Give yourself some space from all of it. I promised to consider it and hung up, feeling marginally better. At least someone was on my side. The next morning, I woke to pounding on the front door. I stumbled out of bed, expecting to find Catherine. Instead, it was David, her business partner. We need to talk, he said grimly. I let him in, trying to shake off sleep. How did you know I was here? Catherine thought you might be. She's in a bad way, Jacob. Not my problem anymore, I said, heading to the kitchen to make coffee. David followed me. You don't understand. After you left last night, things got ugly. Peter tried to explain himself, claimed the whole thing was a misunderstanding. Catherine went ballistic, accused him of trying to save his own skin while throwing her under the bus. I raised an eyebrow. Lovers' quarrel? More than that. She threw her drink in his face, started screaming about how he'd promised to leave his wife for her. This was news to me. Peter's married? David nodded. Apparently he reconciled with his ex-wife 6 months ago but didn't tell Catherine. That's why he kept postponing their plans to go public with their relationship. The coffee maker gurgled as I processed this information. So she wasn't just the other woman. She was the other woman who didn't even know she was the other woman. Exactly, David said. And when she found out, she completely lost it. Started revealing all sorts of details about their relationship, things none of us wanted to hear. By the end, she'd basically confirmed everything in your dossier and then some. I handed him a cup of coffee. Why are you telling me this? David sighed. Because as her business partner, I need to know how far you're planning to take this. The financial impropriety alone could destroy the agency if it became public. We've got investors, clients who would pull out immediately if they caught wind of this scandal. You're worried about damage control, I realized. Can you blame me? 15 years of building this business, and Catherine could bring it all down because she couldn't keep her pants on. I considered his words. I had no quarrel with David or the other partners. They were collateral damage in a war they didn't start. I'm not planning to go public, I said finally. My issue is with Catherine and Peter, not with the agency. David's relief was palpable. Thank you. We're placing Catherine on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation. Peter's company has already recalled him to Chicago headquarters, so they're both facing professional consequences. Significant ones, David confirmed. Catherine will likely be forced to resign once the investigation confirms the financial misconduct. And from what I hear, Peter's being sidelined at Nexus Technologies, technically still employed but stripped of all his responsibilities. There was a certain poetic justice to it all. They'd risked everything for their affair, and now they were losing everything because of it. One more thing, David said, setting down his coffee cup. Catherine asked me to give you this. He handed me an envelope with my name written on it in Catherine's elegant handwriting. I took it, but didn't open it. Tell her I'll read it when I'm ready, I said. David nodded and stood to leave. For what it's worth, Jacob, I'm sorry about all this. Catherine was always so put together, so professional. None of us saw this coming. After he left, I sat staring at the envelope for a long time before placing it in a drawer unopened. Whatever Catherine had to say could wait. I needed time to sort through my own thoughts first. I spent the weekend at the beach house, ignoring calls and messages. On Sunday night, I finally returned to our home in Brookline, half expecting to find Catherine there despite my instructions for her to stay away. The house was empty, but signs of her hasty packing were everywhere. Drawers left partially open, empty hangers in the closet, gaps on the bathroom counter where her expensive creams and lotions had been. In the guest room, I found a note on the pillow. Staying with Melissa. We need to talk when you're ready. Melissa was her college roommate, a divorce attorney who had never particularly liked me. Perfect. Monday morning, I met with my own lawyer, Bernard, a shrewd 60-year-old who had handled my real estate transactions for years. I won't lie to you, Jacob, he said after I explained the situation. This could get messy. Infidelity doesn't impact divorce settlements like it used to, but the financial impropriety adds a wrinkle. If Catherine used joint funds for her affair, we might have a case for dissipation of marital assets. I don't want to ruin her, I clarified. I just want what's fair. Bernard nodded, of course, but fair can be subjective in these situations. My advice? Document everything, communicate only through me, and prepare for a marathon, not a sprint. Divorces like this can take months, even years. Years. The word hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't imagine being tethered to Catherine in this betrayal for years. What if we settle quickly? Give her what she wants? Bernard frowned. That's rarely advisable. Emotions are high right now, and quick settlements often leave my clients with regrets. I left his office with a heavy feeling in my chest. The satisfaction of exposing Catherine's affair was fading, replaced by the grim reality of what lay ahead. Months of legal wrangling, division of assets, the dismantling of 15 years of shared life. That evening, I finally opened Catherine's letter. Her handwriting was shaky, unlike her usual confident script. Jacob, what you did was cruel and unnecessary. You could have confronted me privately. Instead, you chose to destroy not just our marriage, but my professional reputation and career. Is that what I deserved for falling out of love with you? Yes, I made mistakes. I should have been honest about my feelings. I should have told you I wanted out of our marriage before anything happened with Peter. But you've ensured that everyone in our lives will only see me as a cheater and a thief, rather than as someone who was trapped in a relationship that had grown cold years ago. Your revenge might feel satisfying now, but eventually you'll realize you didn't just punish me. You burned down everything we built together out of spite. I'll have my lawyer contact yours regarding the divorce proceedings. Catherine. Her attempt to reframe the narrative, to cast herself as the victim trapped in a loveless marriage, was exactly what I'd expected. It only reinforced that I'd made the right decision in exposing the truth. What Catherine failed to understand was that I hadn't acted out of spite or even revenge. I'd acted out of self-preservation. In that moment when I found her messages, something fundamental had shifted inside me. I realized how completely I'd surrendered my identity to our partnership, how I'd been living in the shadow of her success, accepting less than I deserved because I thought that's what love meant. The public exposure wasn't about humiliating her. It was about reclaiming my own narrative, about refusing to be the pathetic, deceived husband who either didn't know or chose to look the other way. It was about forcing everyone, including myself, to confront the truth. I crumpled the letter and threw it away. Catherine had always been skilled at rewriting history to suit her purposes. I wouldn't let her rewrite this. The next day, I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Jacob, it's Peter Whitaker. I nearly hung up, but curiosity kept me on the line. What do you want? To apologize, he said, his voice strained. What happened between Catherine and me, it wasn't planned. It just happened. Affairs don't just happen, I said coldly. They're choices. Hundreds of little choices to betray someone who trusts you. You're right, he admitted. And I'm paying for those choices now. My wife has filed for divorce, again. Nexus Technologies has essentially demoted me. My reputation in the industry is shot. Am I supposed to feel sorry for you? No, he said quickly. I deserve all of it. I'm calling because there's something you should know, something Catherine didn't tell you. I braced myself. What? We were planning to leave together, start our own agency, take the Nexus account with us. She was going to tell you after we secured the funding. So it wasn't just an affair, it was a complete life overhaul. New lover, new business, new start. I would have been the last to know, presented with a fait accompli once all the pieces were in place. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you deserve to know the whole truth, Peter said. And because Catherine is telling everyone who'll listen that you're unstable, that you blew everything out of proportion. She's trying to salvage her reputation by destroying yours. This didn't surprise me. Catherine had always been strategic, even in crisis. Thanks for the warning, I said, but I don't need your help. I understand, Peter said. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for the affair, but for everything. You seem like a decent guy who didn't deserve any of this. After he hung up, I sat thinking about his revelation. Catherine and Peter had been planning a future together, a future that required dismantling our marriage and her business partnership. The affair wasn't just about sex or emotional connection. It was about ambition and opportunity. Somehow this made the betrayal even worse. It wasn't a momentary weakness or a desperate search for connection. It was calculated, strategic. The Catherine I knew through and through. I called David immediately and relayed what Peter had told me. That tracks with what we've discovered, David said grimly. We found a business plan on Catherine's company laptop. Detailed projections for a new agency with Peter listed as co-founder. They were planning to poach our biggest clients, including Nexus Technologies, I guessed. That's the irony, David said. According to our contacts there, Nexus was never going to follow Peter to a new agency. They value their relationship with our firm too much to risk it on a startup. So their grand plan was doomed from the start. Essentially, David confirmed, which makes this whole disaster even more pointless. I thanked him for the information and hung up, feeling a strange mix of vindication and sadness. Catherine had been willing to risk everything, our marriage, her partnership, her professional reputation, for a fantasy that was never going to materialize. That afternoon, I got a text from my friend Marcus. You might want to avoid social media for a while. Too late. I was already seeing the posts. Catherine had apparently shared her side of the story with several friends, who were now vague posting about narcissistic men and public humiliation as abuse. No names were mentioned, but anyone in our circle would know exactly who they were talking about. Two could play that game. I considered posting my own veiled references to cheating wives and financial impropriety, but stopped myself. That wasn't who I wanted to be. I'd made my statement at the restaurant. Anything more would just be petty. Instead, I called James again. I think I'll take you up on that offer to visit Seattle. Good, and he said. Get out of Boston for a while. Let the dust settle. The next morning, I booked a flight for the following week and filed for divorce through Bernard. I was taking the first steps toward whatever came next. Before I could leave town, however, there was one more confrontation I couldn't avoid. Catherine showed up at the house unannounced, using her key despite my request that she stay away. I was in the kitchen when I heard the front door open. She stood in the doorway looking both defiant and diminished. Her usual impeccable appearance was slightly disheveled, hair not quite perfectly styled, makeup not quite hiding the circles under her eyes. You changed the alarm code, she said accusingly. You changed the rules of our marriage, I countered. Why are you here, Catherine? To talk sense into you. This divorce doesn't have to be contentious. We can handle it like adults. I laughed. Like the adults we were when you were sleeping with Peter while charging it to your company? Or like the adults we are now with you spreading rumors about my mental stability? She had the grace to look uncomfortable. I never said you were unstable. No, you just implied it to anyone who would listen. Catherine sighed and moved further into the kitchen. Look, Jacob, what I did was wrong, the affair, the lies, all of it. But what you did at the restaurant was cruel. You humiliated me in front of my colleagues, my peers, as opposed to the kindness you showed me by betraying our marriage for months. That was different, she insisted. That was private. What you did was public. You made it public the moment you started embezzling from your company to fund your affair. You made it public when you and Peter started planning your new agency. You made it public when you started lying to everyone in our lives. Catherine flinched. How did you know about the agency? Peter told me, I said, right before he mentioned that Nexus was never going to leave your firm for your little startup. Your entire plan was built on sand, Catherine. She sank into a chair, the fight going out of her. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? You leave me, start a new life with Peter, and everyone just accepts it without question? You get to be the woman brave enough to leave a stagnant marriage for true love. Something like that, she admitted. Is that so terrible? To want a clean break? The break stopped being clean the moment you started cheating, and I said, you don't get to control the narrative anymore, Catherine. You don't get to decide how this story is told. She looked up at me, tears in her eyes. For a moment, I glimpsed the woman I'd fallen in love with, vulnerable, real, not the polished professional she presented to the world. I did love you, Jacob. For many years, but something changed. I changed. You could have talked to me, I said quietly. We could have tried counseling. Or if you were truly unhappy, you could have asked for a divorce before starting something with Peter. I know, she whispered. I was a coward. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of 15 years hanging between us. What happens now? She finally asked. Now we get divorced, I said simply. You go your way, I go mine. We divide our assets fairly. We try not to destroy each other in the process. Catherine nodded slowly. I can agree to that. Despite what you might think, I don't want to hurt you any more than I already have. Then tell your friends to stop posting about me. They're just being protective, she said. They're creating a narrative where I'm the villain and you're the victim. We both know that's not the truth. Catherine stood up. I'll talk to them, and I'll have Melissa contact Bernard about the divorce terms. I want this to be over as quickly as possible. So do I agreed. As she turned to leave, she paused. For what it's worth, I am sorry, Jacob. Not just for the affair, but for how I handled everything. You deserve better. After she left, I poured myself a drink and sat alone in our kitchen. The kitchen we'd remodeled together 3 years ago, arguing over countertop materials and backsplash tiles. It felt like a lifetime ago. The confrontation with Catherine had been surprisingly anticlimactic. No shouting, no dramatic accusations. Just the quiet acknowledgement that whatever we'd had was gone now. Maybe it had been gone long before Peter entered the picture. The next week passed in a blur of legal consultations and practical arrangements. I put the house on the market, neither of us wanted to live there anymore, and began packing for my trip to Seattle. Catherine and I communicated through our lawyers, the initial hostility gradually giving way to a business-like efficiency. Word of our separation spread quickly through our social circle. Friends took sides, as friends do in these situations. Some reached out with awkward condolences. Others maintained a diplomatic distance. A few, those who had witnessed the restaurant confrontation or heard detailed accounts, watched me with a new wariness, as if unsure what I might do next. The night before my flight to Seattle, Marcus invited me for a drink at his restaurant after closing. We sat at the bar, the dining room dark and empty around us. "So," he said, pouring me a generous whiskey, "you're really leaving." "Just for a few weeks," I clarified. "I need some distance." Marcus nodded. "Probably smart. Things are still pretty raw around here." "How bad is it?" I asked. "Depends who you ask," he said carefully. "Most people think Catherine got what was coming to her. A few think you went overboard with the public exposure. Everyone agrees Peter is a snake." I smiled slightly. "At least there's consensus on something." "What about you?" Marcus asked. "Any regrets?" I considered the question. About exposing the affair? Number. About how I did it? Maybe. In retrospect, I could have confronted them privately first, given Catherine a chance to come clean before involving her partners. Would she have taken it? Probably not, I admitted. Catherine has never been one to admit defeat. Marcus topped off my glass. Then stop second-guessing yourself. You did what you felt was necessary in the moment. Now you need to focus on what comes next. That's the problem, I said. I have no idea what comes next. For 15 years, my life has been defined by my marriage to Catherine, by our shared goals and plans. Now I'm just adrift. That's not necessarily a bad thing, Marcus pointed out. How many people get a chance to completely reinvent themselves at our age? I hadn't thought of it that way. The end of my marriage wasn't just a loss, it was also an opportunity. A chance to rediscover who I was apart from Catherine, to build a life that reflected my own desires and ambitions, not our carefully curated joint identity. You might be right about, I said, raising my glass. To new beginnings. Marcus clinked his glass against mine. To new beginnings and to authentic lives. Authentic. The word resonated with me. So much of my life with Catherine had been about appearances. The right house, the right vacations, the right social connections. We'd created a perfect external life while allowing our internal connection to wither. Maybe now I could build something real, something honest. I flew to Seattle the next day, leaving behind the wreckage of my marriage and the uncertainty of what would follow. James met me at the airport, wrapping me in a bear hug. "Welcome to the rainy city," he said, taking my bag. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected," I admitted. There's something freeing about having your worst fear come true. Once the unthinkable happens, everything else seems manageable. James laughed. That's a surprisingly optimistic take from someone whose wife just had an affair. "Don't get me wrong," I said as we walked to his car. "I'm still angry. I still feel betrayed, but I'm also relieved. Like I've been carrying this weight of maintaining a perfect marriage and now I can finally put it down." "Makes sense," James said. "From what you've told me, you and Catherine were more like business partners than husband and wife toward the end." He wasn't wrong. Catherine and I had been efficient together, successful together, but when had we last been truly intimate? Not just physically, but emotionally. When had we last shared our fears, our dreams, our unvarnished selves? James lived in a modern loft in Capitol Hill with his girlfriend, Tara, a pediatric surgeon with a warm smile and no-nonsense attitude. Their place was all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, with views of downtown Seattle and the bay beyond. "Make yourself at home," James said, showing me to the guest bedroom. "Tara's on call tonight, so it's just us until tomorrow." That first night, James and I stayed up late, drinking beer and talking like we hadn't since we were younger. He filled me in on his life in Seattle, and I shared more details about the implosion of my marriage than I'd told anyone else. You know what the worst part is? I said, staring out at the twinkling lights of the city. Not the affair itself, but the realization that Catherine and I had been living separate lives for years before Peter came along. We were roommates who occasionally had sex, not partners. James nodded. I saw it the last time I visited you guys. The way you talked around each other instead of to each other. I almost said something, but it wasn't your place, I finished for him. I get it. I wouldn't have listened anyway. So what now, he asked. After the divorce is finalized? I shrugged. Start over, I guess. Figure out who I am without Catherine. You could move to Seattle, James suggested. The real estate market here is booming. You'd make a killing with your experience. The idea was tempting. A completely fresh start in a new city, away from the whispers and sideways glances of Boston society, away from the places that held memories of my life with Catherine. I'll think about it, Maynard, I promised. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of unfamiliar voices. I found James in the kitchen with Tara and a striking woman with dark curly hair and bright blue eyes. Jake, this is Alexis, James said. She's the real estate agent I was telling you about last night. I shot him a look. He hadn't mentioned any real estate agent, but extended my hand. Nice to meet you. Likewise, Alexis said, her handshake firm. James says you're in luxury properties in Boston. I'd love to pick your brain about the East Coast market sometime. Sure, I said, accepting the coffee Tara handed me, though I'm technically on vacation from all things real estate at the moment. Understood, Alexis smiled. But if you change your mind, I'm showing a stunning waterfront property this afternoon that might interest you. Purely for comparative market research, of course. Her eyes held mine a beat longer than necessary, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The simple, uncomplicated attraction to someone new. No history, no expectations, just potential. Actually, I found myself saying, market research sounds perfect. 4 hours later, I was standing in a modernist glass and cedar home on the shores of Lake Washington, listening to Alexis detail its features to a wealthy tech couple. She was good, knowledgeable without being pushy, personable without being fake. I found myself studying her technique as much as the property itself. After the clients left, promising to think about it, Alexis turned to me. So, how'd I do? Impressively, I admitted, though you might have emphasized the smart home integration more. Tech people love that stuff. Noted, she said, locking the front door. Now debrief over drinks? There's a great place nearby with a view of the lake. At the bar, conversation flowed easily. Alexis had moved to Seattle from San Francisco 5 years ago after her own divorce. Married too young, she explained, swirling her wine. We grew in different directions. The split was amicable, but it still felt like failure at the time. I know that feeling, I said. Even though Catherine's affair made the decision pretty clear-cut, there's still this sense that I failed at the most important relationship of my life. Alexis studied me. James mentioned your situation. Pretty dramatic exit strategy, I winced. Not my finest moment, maybe. I don't know, she said thoughtfully. There's something to be said for bringing secrets into the light. When my ex and I split, we told everyone it was mutual and friendly, which was true as far as it went. But we didn't mention his emotional affair with his colleague or my growing resentment. Sometimes I wish we'd been more honest, if only with ourselves. Her candor was refreshing after years of careful image management with Catherine. Enough about failed marriages, Alexis said, raising her glass. To new beginnings. You sound like my brother, I laughed. He said the same thing last night. Smart man, she said with a smile. So is Seattle growing on you yet? By the time we finished our drinks, the sun was setting over the lake, casting everything in a golden glow. Alexis drove me back to James' loft, and before I got out of the car, she handed me her business card. In case you decide to make that fresh start more permanent, she said, I know all the best neighborhoods. I took the card, our fingers brushing. I'll keep that in mind. Upstairs, I found James and Tara preparing dinner. James raised an eyebrow when I walked in. Good day of market research? Very educational, I said, ignoring his knowing look. Over the next 2 weeks, Seattle worked its magic on me. The clean air, the stunning landscapes, the sense of possibility. It all felt like an antidote to the toxicity I'd left behind in Boston. I joined James for hikes on nearby trails, spent afternoons exploring different neighborhoods, and yes, met Alexis for coffee twice more. She was easy to be with, smart, funny, straightforward. There was an attraction there, unmistakable but uncomplicated. Neither of us pushed it, both aware that my life was in flux, but it remained a tantalizing possibility, a glimpse of what life after Catherine might look like. Meanwhile, back in Boston, the divorce proceedings were moving forward with surprising efficiency. Catherine, perhaps eager to put the scandal behind her, was being reasonable about the division of assets. The house had multiple offers within days of listing. Our lawyers were working out the details with minimal drama. Then, 3 days before I was scheduled to return to Boston, everything changed. I was having breakfast with James and Tara when my phone rang. Bernard, my lawyer. "Jacob, we have a situation," he said without preamble. "Catherine's claiming you hacked her phone to obtain the text messages you revealed at the restaurant. She's threatening to file criminal charges." "That's ridiculous," I sputtered. "Her phone was unlocked. I saw the messages right there on the screen. She's saying you used her fingerprint while she was sleeping to unlock it, then took screenshots. She's calling it unauthorized access of her personal data." My mind raced. It's her word against mine. And why wait until now to make this claim? According to her lawyer, she was too traumatized by the public humiliation to think clearly until recently, Bernard said, the skepticism clear in his voice. "Look, I don't think she has much of a case, but it could complicate the divorce if she pursues this." After hanging up, I relayed the conversation to James, who looked concerned. "This changes things," he said. "If Catherine's going on the offensive, you need to get back to Boston and deal with this head on." I nodded, already booking an earlier flight on my phone. So much for an amicable split. "Hey," Tara said, squeezing my shoulder. "Don't let her rewrite history." You know what happened, but did I? The night I discovered the messages was becoming increasingly hazy in my memory. Had Catherine's phone been unlocked, or had I seen her enter her passcode earlier that day and used it? Had I taken screenshots, or just read the messages? In my shock and anger, had I crossed a line without even realizing it? Number. I remembered clearly now. The phone was unlocked, sitting on the bathroom counter. I hadn't needed to bypass any security. This was Catherine doing what she always did, finding a way to make herself the victim even when she was clearly in the wrong. I flew back to Boston the next morning, the sense of peace I'd found in Seattle evaporating with each mile eastward. By the time I landed, I had 3 voicemails from Bernard and 1 from David, Catherine's business partner. I called David first, curious about his involvement. "Jacob, I know this isn't my business anymore, but you should know what Catherine's doing," he said urgently. "She's telling everyone who'll listen that you illegally accessed her data. She's even suggesting you planted evidence of the affair to destroy her reputation." "That's insane," I said, feeling a surge of anger. She admitted to the affair that night at the restaurant. There were witnesses. She's saying she only admitted it because she was blindsided and confused, that she went along with it because she was afraid of what else you might do. David sounded uncomfortable. "Look, no one who was there that night believes her. We all saw her face when Peter walked in, but she's convincing to people who don't know the full story." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked suspiciously. "I thought you'd be on her side professionally." "The agency is dissolving," David said flatly. "After Catherine's departure, we discovered more financial irregularities. Nothing criminal, but enough to erode trust between the remaining partners. We're winding down operations and going our separate ways." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it. David and his partners were collateral damage in a war they didn't start. "Don't be," he said. "It was probably time. But I wanted you to know what Catherine's saying because it's not just about your divorce anymore. She's trying to rebuild her professional reputation by destroying yours." After hanging up, I called Bernard, Father Bernard, who confirmed everything David had told me. Catherine was on a campaign to reframe the entire situation as an elaborate setup orchestrated by a jealous, controlling husband. "The good news," Bernard said, "is that she has no actual evidence you hacked anything. And we have those financial records showing she misused company funds, which her own partners have verified." "So what do we do?" We call her bluff, Bernard said firmly. Tell her if she pursues these allegations, we'll counter with a defamation suit and ensure that every detail of her affair and financial misconduct becomes public record. It was brutal but effective. Within days, Catherine withdrew her claims about phone hacking and returned to the original divorce terms. But the damage to what remaining goodwill existed between us was irreparable. Any hope of a dignified, respectful split was gone. The final divorce hearing was set for September, 3 months away. In the meantime, I had to decide what to do next. Stay in Boston, where Catherine's whisper campaign had already tainted my professional reputation, or take a chance on Seattle, where Alexis and the promise of a fresh start waited. The decision became easier when my boss called me into his office one rainy afternoon. Jacob, I'll be blunt, Richard said, closing the door behind me. Clients are asking questions. That scene at Sorolina has become something of a legend in certain circles, and not everyone appreciates the drama. Some of our more conservative clients are requesting different agents. I felt a flush of anger. Because I exposed my wife's affair? Would they prefer I'd kept quiet and played the fool? Richard held up his hands. I'm not judging you. Hell, I'd probably have done the same in your shoes. But perception matters in this business. And right now, the perception is that you're volatile. Volatile, I repeated flatly. For standing up for myself. For the public nature of it, Richard clarified. Look, this will blow over eventually. But in the meantime, I'm thinking it might be best if you handled our out-of-state clients primarily. Less direct contact with the Boston social scene. It was a demotion in all but name. The out-of-state portfolio was smaller, less prestigious, with fewer opportunities for the high-commission sales I'd specialized in. I stood up. I think I'll take some more time off instead. Consider it an extended leave of absence. Richard looked relieved. Of course. Take all the time you need to sort things out. As I cleaned out my desk, I realized I felt more liberated than upset. Boston had become a battlefield. Every interaction loaded with subtext. Every professional setback tied to the implosion of my marriage. Perhaps it was time to concede this particular theater of war to Catherine and build something new elsewhere. That night, I called Alexis. How serious were you about helping me find a place in Seattle? I asked when she answered. I could hear the smile in her voice. Very serious. Does this mean you're making the move? I'm considering it, I said. I need a fresh start, and Seattle felt right, but I'd want to set up some interviews with brokerages first, see if there's a place for me professionally. Leave that to me, she said confidently. Your reputation precedes you. The good parts, I mean. I've already had interest from my firm's manager when I mentioned you might relocate. The pieces were falling into place with a speed that would have been alarming if it didn't feel so right. Within a week, I had 3 interviews scheduled with Seattle real estate firms and a short list of potential apartments Alexis had compiled. Nothing permanent, she'd emphasized, just rentals to get you started. You can invest in property once you're settled. Her thoughtfulness touched me. Catherine would have pushed for the most impressive address from the start, appearance always paramount. Alexis understood that I needed to find my footing first. As my departure from Boston approached, I had one final piece of unfinished business, a meeting with Catherine to sign some preliminary divorce papers. We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a conference room at Bernard's office. She arrived exactly on time, dressed impeccably in a navy suit that screamed professional competence. Her face was carefully composed, showing nothing of the woman who had shared my bed for 15 years. Jacob, she said with a nod. Catherine, I replied. You look well. Thank you. She sat across from me, placing her designer handbag on the table between us like a barrier. I understand you're moving to Seattle? News traveled fast. Yes, I've accepted a position with Westlake Properties. Running away? The challenge in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. Moving forward, I corrected. There's nothing for me here anymore. She flinched slightly, the first crack in her composed facade. You could have fought for us, you know, before all this. If you'd paid attention, noticed I was unhappy. Don't, I interrupted. Don't rewrite our history to make your affair my fault. You could have talked to me if you were unhappy. You chose deception instead. Catherine looked away. I did. And I've paid for that choice. My career is in shambles. My reputation was damaged by your own actions, I finished. not by my exposure of them. She met my eyes then, and for a moment I glimpsed genuine regret. You're right, I made my choices. But so did you, Jacob. You chose the most destructive path possible when you discovered the affair. You could have confronted me privately. Instead, you orchestrated a public execution. There was truth in her words, uncomfortable as it was to acknowledge. I had chosen the most damaging way to expose her betrayal, driven by a need to control the narrative, to ensure she couldn't spin the story to make herself the sympathetic character. Maybe we both chose destruction over healing, I said quietly. Maybe that says everything about why our marriage failed in the first place. Catherine nodded slowly. Maybe it does. We signed the papers in silence, the scratch of pen on paper the only sound in the room. When we finished, Catherine stood to leave, then hesitated. For what it's worth, she said, I am sorry, Jacob. Not just for the affair, but for everything that came after. The allegations about phone hacking, the rumors. It was petty and beneath both of us. Thank you for saying that, I said, surprised by her candor. I'm sorry, too, for the public nature of the exposure. You deserved a chance to explain yourself privately first. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Would you have listened? Probably not, I admitted. I was too angry. And I was too defensive. She picked up her bag. Goodbye, Jacob. I hope Seattle brings you what you're looking for. As she walked out, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of closure. The recognition that we had both made mistakes, both chosen paths that led to mutual destruction, rather than salvaging what could have been saved. 2 days later, I boarded a plane to Seattle with 2 suitcases and no return ticket. The rest of my belongings would follow once I found permanent housing. As the plane took off, I watched Boston recede beneath me, the city where I'd built a life with Catherine growing smaller until it disappeared beneath the clouds. In my pocket was Alexis's business card, a tangible symbol of possibilities ahead. I wasn't naive enough to think that moving across the country would magically heal the wounds of betrayal and divorce. There would be difficult days ahead, moments of doubt and regret, but for the first time since discovering Catherine's affair, I felt genuinely hopeful. Not because of Alexis, though her presence in Seattle was certainly a draw, but because I was finally making choices based on what I wanted, not what fit into the carefully constructed image Catherine and I had maintained for so long. The plane banked west, toward mountains and ocean, toward a city where no one knew me as Catherine's husband, or that guy who exposed his wife's affair at Sorolina. In Seattle, I could be simply Jacob, a man starting over, carrying the lessons of his past but not defined by them. My phone buzzed with a text from Alexis. Safe travels. The city's waiting for you, I smiled and typed back. On my way. Ready for whatever comes next. As we soared above the clouds, I realized that the exposure of Catherine's affair had been both an ending and a beginning. The public revelation had shattered the illusion of our perfect marriage, but in doing so, it had freed us both to build something more authentic. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment overlooking Lake Union, watching the sun set over the Olympic Mountains. My phone rang, James checking in as he did every Sunday. How's it going, little brother? He asked. Good, I said, and managed it. Really good, actually. The Dixon property sold yesterday, highest price per square foot in that neighborhood this year. Killing it professionally as expected, James laughed. And personally? I glanced back into the apartment where Alexis was cooking dinner, dancing to music only she could hear through her earbuds. Taking it slow, but heading in the right direction. Catherine signed the final papers, James said, his tone cautious. Mom told me, it's official now. I know, I said. Bernard called yesterday. How do you feel? I considered the question, watching the last rays of sunlight glitter on the water. Free, I said finally, like I can finally close that chapter completely. No regrets about how it all went down? Some, I admitted. The restaurant scene wasn't my proudest moment, but I don't regret the truth coming out, however messily it happened. Catherine and I were living a lie long before her affair. At least now we both have a chance at something real. Deep thoughts from my formerly superficial brother, James teased. Seattle's turning you philosophical. I laughed. Maybe so. Or maybe near-death experiences do that to people. Near death? That's what divorce felt like, I explained. The death of the future I thought I had, the identity I'd built around being Catherine's husband. But you survive, and on the other side, there's possibility. Alexis caught my eye through the window and pointed to her watch, mouthing, "Dinner's ready." "I gotta go," I told James. "Talk next week?" "Count on it. And Jake, I'm proud of you. Not for the restaurant thing, that was certifiably insane, but for rebuilding after, for not letting bitterness define you." His words stayed with me as I joined Alexis at the table, the Seattle skyline twinkling through the windows. She'd made paella, a recipe she'd been perfecting for weeks, and poured 2 glasses of Spanish wine. "2 new chapters," she said, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers. "2 authentic lives." As we ate, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The night I discovered Catherine's affair had been the most painful of my life. The public exposure at Sorolina, the most reckless thing I'd ever done. But without that rupture, that complete demolition of the facade we'd built, I might never have found my way to this moment, sharing a homemade meal with a woman who knew my flaws and my history and liked me anyway. A woman who didn't need me to be one half of a perfect power couple, who valued honesty over appearance. "You're quiet tonight," Alexis observed, refilling our glasses. "Everything okay with James?" "Everything's fine," I assured her, just thinking about how differently things might have turned out. "Regrets?" she asked, echoing James's question. I looked at her, brilliant, kind, honest Alexis, who had never pretended to be anything other than exactly who she was. "Not a single one," I said, and meant it.